It goes without saying that the story of Kingdom Hearts is beyond complex. It's an odd labyrinth of Disney marketing, heartfelt emotion, and anime boys with egregious hairstyles, yet I somehow managed to get dragged into it all. Judging Kingdom Hearts' story as a collective is not only a mammoth of a task, but also something that I don't quite have the time to get into now, so for everyone's sake I'll be focusing on one of my favourite games from the series from a story-driven perspective. This is a narrative review of Kingdom Hearts 358 over 2 days. Before I begin this review, I want to make it clear that this is a purely subjective take on this title, and I'm by no means saying that this is a masterpiece of a game that will suit everyone's taste. A lot of the things I say might even be seen as thinking too highly of a game that is not only known for its critical flaws, but also features Mickey Mouse in a cult outfit on the box art. However, I will be taking a dig with some of the elements that I find to be a problem later on. Love this game as I might, nobody can excuse Ricky and Rocky over here being complete edgelords.
The dark power that I've been holding back.
Despite what the name might imply, 358 over 2 days is not about mathematics. It's actually a combat-based RPG that launched on the DS in 2009 to surprisingly good reviews compared to how many deem it as one of the worst in the series gameplay-wise, with the exclusion of Union Cross, but who even plays? Since then, the story has been adapted into a manga series and also an illustrated novel, the latter of which was my introduction to the series. Most recently, it was included in a ported collection of the game's HD 1.5 remix, which actually cut out the gameplay and instead presented itself as a cutscene movie, along with the other DS title recoded. The story has slightly different alterations per release, and whilst my main resource for this video was the HD remix, I found that the manga adaptation takes far greater liberties with how it presents the events of the story, along with the character interactions and development, making it my favourite of the four. The story itself is of a boy named Roxas, who upon waking up is completely unaware of who he is, his surroundings, and even basic social concepts, such as figures of speech or even remembering his peers' names. In essence, Roxas is introduced as a character who knows as little as we do regarding the world and the logic of the game, as well as the strange cult he is inaugurated into, known as Organization 13. Through a series of events that show the characters going through highs and lows, the whole story feels like an oncoming storm, calm and settled at the beginning, but gradually taking tonal dips and jumps that accumulate into the climax of the plot, where the characters' relationships begin to fall apart at the seams, as they desperately try to get answers, yet also retain what little they can of how things used to be. Over the course of the narrative, we see how Roxas befriends two members of the organization, Axel and Shion, and how they affect both one another in terms of character growth, but also the challenges that they are faced with from both the enemies of the game, the Heartless, and the members of the organization. Shion and Axel are pivotal roles in the story, aiding Roxas as friends, though are both on very different ends of a spectrum when it comes to how they help him understand just what is going on, especially with the organisation they have been somewhat born into, and who they are as nobodies, beings without the ability to feel true emotions and lack a heart of any kind. Shion, the timid of the trio, is a character that Roxas can sympathise and relate to. She is of a similar age in relative sense, and is also considered to be one of the important members of the organisation, as both she and Roxas are the only two able to slay the Heartless.
But I don't.
Me neither.
Well, maybe that right there is what makes you guys the most unique in the organization.
The two are actually very similar in a number of ways that the player finds out over time, and it all comes full circle when, spoiler alert, they both find out that their existence was caused by the same boy Sqaure. The details are very complicated in how it happens, the kid stabs his heart, and then some stuff with a memory witch happens, and I won't get into it now. One of the unravelling narratives in Days follows how Shion perceives herself, and the slow realization that she, along with Roxas, is being used as a tool for the organization's aspirations.
Sqaure said you and me were pretty special. Exceptional, he said.
Special? Isn't that just another way of saying that I'm a mistake?
You're not a mistake.
It gives the player a deeper understanding of how self-conscious and belittling Shion thinks of herself, such as the anxiety she suffers when losing her ability to slay the Heartless, as, in her own words, she believes this renders her useless. As the plot progresses, she becomes more and more desperate for the truth about her role. And the more she finds, the more she questions her identity as a friend, a member, and also this valuable tool that she is seen to really be. It's actually a stark contrast to Roxas, who in fact seems to be oblivious of a lot of Shion's troubles that she provokes in the form of existential questions, and by the time he realizes that she's been coping with this, it's too late. She gives herself up in order to be used in the way that the organization wanted to use her, and abandons any prospects of forging her own identity as a person after her friendship with Axel breaks apart.
But how do you know that? Everybody thinks they're right.
This is right.
They're gonna destroy you!
Please don't hold back, Axel. Promise.
It's a sad and tragic character arc that has the player grow attached to the emotional hardships that these three face, and was a premise that the manga definitely delved deeper into, hence why I recommended it as my favourite. Axel, on the other hand, is almost written to be the complete opposite. He's the snide mentor-like friend that takes Roxas under his wing, and is the first character that we're properly introduced to through the eyes of Roxas. He's a sly and cunning individual who knows a whole lot more than he lets on to, and this both helps Roxas get to grips with the logic and world around him, as well as making him somewhat suspicious, especially when we find out that he might have alternative motives with arguably the antagonist of the game, Sqaure.
I merely rounded up and sent off the ones who were getting in the way.
Whoa there. Was I one of those you wanted to erase?
Good to see you made it back safe.
I disposed of Zexion, by the way. I moved things along just the way you wanted.
He acts as a character that we both believe to be untrustworthy, yet feel comforted by, as he acts as one of Roxas's escapes to the day-to-day work the organization put them through. Because of this very fact, however, and Axel's indecisiveness to whose promises he fulfills, this is what causes a lot of the conflicts in the latter part of the game, especially when Roxas and Shion begin to grow out of their vulnerable and oblivious states, instead wanting answers for what they cannot understand. Leaving them in the dark affects their trust, but the alternative would clash with Sqaure's wishes. Throughout the game, there are subtle and not so subtle concepts that do make me appreciate the way that they depict the good and bad times that these three go through. Several items appear as visual motifs such as seashells and the Keyblade, but by far the most prominent is the sea salt ice cream, representing togetherness and acts as a pact of friendship, as it is shared when characters establish mutual trust for one another. Twilight Town is a location that is featured a staggering amount in this game, and that's because in the grand scheme of things, there's only really 3 narrative-related locations. The 2 most present, however, each contribute towards the tonal implications of the scenes. For example, the world that never was is the home to the nobodies. It's cold and barren and gloomy, just like the beings that inhabit the castle and the organization. Twilight Town, and more specifically the clock tower during dusk, is a stark contrast, giving the scenes serene and warm tones. Moments spent here with the characters are intimate, touching, and real. Any conflict that does occur here feels bittersweet, and feels like a stain on the peaceful haven that the trio have made for themselves. So, I mentioned this at the beginning, but Days is by no means a perfect tragedy story. The character insights, growth, and developments that the main 3 characters go through make the story pluck at my emotions and definitely grow invested in their struggles, making it my favourite Kingdom Hearts game. But glaring issues do start to form when you consider that what I've talked about isn't even covering the entire narrative. You see, one of the main problems with Days is that it's an expositional story that takes place alongside Chain of Memories. Large plot points that seem to come out of nowhere, such as Roxas suddenly falling into a coma, are only fully explained when you consider that the timelines of these games take place side by side. With the novel, this was no problem, because it gave the reader brief cutaways to tell you what was happening from Sqaure's perspective, and hence why it affects Roxas and Days. But in the game, even the port that was only remastered cutscenes prioritizing the story instead of the gameplay, it failed to do so. Kingdom Hearts is naturally not very good with placing its vital information in the right games. I mean, take for example Kingdom Hearts 3, a game where many of the player base were treating this as their first introductory taste to the series. Unless you played the mobile gacha game, you would have no idea who this is, or this is, and especially who these guys are. But Days, your novel adaptation managed to fix a problem you could have implemented into the remastered versions. Lots of the storyline that I haven't touched upon is mainly because I would like to have explained Chain of Memories as well, and what makes things worse is that whilst Days looked like this upon release, Chain of Memories was a whole generation behind, and on a different system no less. At this point, I have accepted that Kingdom Hearts is never going to be told with a shred of competency, but my issues do still stand. If chunks of the story are inexplicably supposed to line up with another game, the game should show the player this so that they can understand what the hell is going on. Other issues of course vary with your Kingdom Hearts tropes, so I'll just point out some of my favourites right here. Clunky scripts during emotional sequences.
Shion! Who else will I have ice cream with?
Bizarre character interactions.
You could say I am the biggest nobody of them all.
Unintentional hilarity that is supposed to be edgy dialogue.
Who are you?
I'm what's left. Or maybe I'm all there ever was.
I meant your name.
Edgy dialogue.
I have to release the power in my heart. The dark power that I've been holding back.
Vicky having about 2 scenes of relevancy, yet he's still in the box art to obviously promote the game to Disney fans. The fact that the pacing of this game can be so gradual at points that it pans out to 3 hours. Okay, so these are all factors that do plague the Kingdom Hearts games, like a curse that Nomura refuses to lift, but in some ways this makes the series that much more enjoyable. I mean, I've made it this far, right? And it's also good to know that in the 3rd game, the 3 of these guys got a happy and satisfying ending, so I'd say it was more than worth it. This silly game, it does hold a place in my heart as that weird Disney game that is actually an angsty, edgy teen anime fanfiction disguised as marketing for the mouse, but Days does interest you. As I mentioned, I would definitely recommend reading the manga, but if that's not your cup of tea, the full cutscene movie is available on YouTube right now to watch. Thank you so much for listening to this review of a game that I know is not the best, but it does mean a lot to me. And thank you for getting this far in the video. I hope you have a good day, and for now, that's all from me.